What would you do if you believed your homeland was heading towards tyranny, if you witnessed a man acquiring excessive power? Would you dare to stop him, even if that man were one of your closest friends and allies? These were the questions tormenting Roman Senator Marcus Junius Brutus in 44 BCE, the fateful year when Julius Caesar would be assassinated. Confronting unchecked power wasn't just a political matter for Brutus, it was personal. He claimed descent from Lucius Junius Brutus, who helped overthrow the tyrannical king known as Tarquin the Proud. Instead of seeking power for himself, the elder Brutus led the people in a passionate oath to never allow a king to rule again. Rome transformed into a republic based on the premise that no individual should wield too much power. Now, 4.5 centuries later, this principle was in jeopardy. Julius Caesar's ascent to the powerful position of consul was impressive. Years of military triumphs made him the wealthiest man in Rome. After defeating his rival Pompey in a bitter civil war, his power peaked. His victories and initiatives, such as distributing lands to the underprivileged, made him a popular leader, and many senators vied for his favor by honoring him with statues, temples, and notably, renaming a month, the current July. More crucially, the title of dictator, intended to grant temporary emergency powers in wartime, was bestowed upon Caesar several times successively, and in 44 BCE he was named Dictator Perpetuo, with a potentially unlimited term. All of this proved to be too much for the senators, who feared a return to the monarchy their ancestors had fought to abolish, as well as for those whose own power and ambitions were hindered by Caesar's rule. A group of conspirators, calling themselves the Liberators, began secretly discussing plans to assassinate him. The leaders were Senator Cassius Longinus and his friend and brother-in-law Brutus. Joining the conspiracy was not an easy choice for Brutus. Although he had sided with Pompey in the ill-fated civil war, Caesar had personally intervened to save his life, pardoning him and even accepting him as a close advisor. Brutus hesitated to conspire against a man who had treated him like a son, but in the end, Cassius's insistence and Brutus's own fear of Caesar's ambitions won out. The awaited moment arrived on March 15th, in a Senate meeting shortly before Caesar was to depart on his next military campaign. As many as 60 conspirators surrounded him, unsheathing daggers from their robes and stabbing him from all sides. According to the story, Caesar fought fiercely until he saw Brutus. Despite Shakespeare's famous line, "Et tu, Brute," we don't know Caesar's actual dying words. Some ancient sources claim he said nothing, while others record the phrase, "and you, my child," fueling speculation that Brutus might have been Caesar's illegitimate son. However, all agree that when Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, he covered his face and surrendered the fight, falling to the ground after being stabbed 23 times. Unfortunately for Brutus and the other conspirators, they underestimated Caesar's popularity among the Roman public, many of whom viewed him as an effective leader and the Senate as a corrupt aristocracy. Moments after Caesar's assassination, Rome was in a state of panic. Most other senators fled, while the assassins barricaded themselves on the Capitoline Hill. Mark Antony, Caesar's friend and co-consul, swiftly seized the upper hand, delivering a passionate speech at Caesar's funeral days later that whipped the crowd into a frenzy of grief and anger. As a result, the liberators were forced out of Rome. The ensuing power vacuum led to a series of civil wars, during which Brutus, facing certain defeat, took his own life. Ironically, the ultimate result was the opposite of what the conspirators had hoped to achieve: the end of the Republic and the concentration of power under the office of emperor. Opinions on the assassination of Caesar were divided from the start and have remained so. As for Brutus himself, few historical figures have inspired such a conflicting legacy. In Dante's Inferno, he was placed in the very center of hell and eternally chewed by Satan himself for his crime of betrayal. However, Swift's Gulliver's Travels described him as one of the most virtuous and benevolent people to have lived. The interpretation of Brutus as either a selfless fighter against dictatorship or an opportunistic traitor has shifted with the tides of history and politics, but even today, over 2,000 years later, questions about the price of liberty, the conflict between personal loyalties and universal ideals, and unintended consequences remain more relevant than ever.